We're going to come back to porting over some of the existing Protractor tests to WDIO. So if you were following along from migrating to WDIO, the previous video, then I did a little bit of cleanup. So again, I'll be referring to my notes. Got a short set of notes this time, but I removed, there was an empty test directory just below source that I removed, not in the source directory, but just on its own at the same level. So I removed that. And then in the end-to-end directory, there were some page objects and some specs that came along with doing the WebDriver initialization. So I removed those as well. They were just sample files, so I removed those. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the app E2E-spec TS file, and this is a Protractor file. So this came with the project, and we're going to start migrating or porting over some of these tests. So in this video, we're going to port over the initial page test, which is pretty basic. It just looks at a few things like the title, the heading, takes a look at what views are available, and then makes sure that the dashboard is the active view. So we're going to port that over piece by piece. So each of these it blocks will port over, and some of that will touch on this get page elements function. So we'll port over pieces of it, but not the whole thing. So let's get started. I'm going to jump right in here. We're going to create a new spec. I'm going to call it, let's call it app.ts. Since this will be kind of the main tests for the application, rather than diving into each of the areas, this will be the sort of a high level test set of tests, just like we have from the original app E2E spec. So we're going to bring over kind of a lot of this stuff. So we'll just copy for now, copy a piece of this over, something like that. And we'll go ahead and kind of close this piece of code out. And I like to do things kind of incrementally, and we'll actually run the tests as some of these compilation errors go away. We'll actually run each of these tests to make sure that we're making good progress and the tests continue to pass. So the expected title, that just comes from a constant defined, I believe, at the top. So we'll bring this code over. And the other thing we want to bring over is that these describe blocks all use a befofeAll, which in Mocha doesn't exist, but the equivalent is befofeAll. So we'll convert that over. Pretty easy to convert. It's just changing the name to befofeAll. And then this get is from Protractor as well. So it's really browser.url. Just an empty quote should bring us to the main page, and that's defined inside of your WDIO config.ts. So if you look at this base URL, so if you just use an empty string, it's gonna use this base URL, which is good enough. That's what we need for this to run properly. So that all looks good. And I don't think we need to change anything else. So let's go ahead and try to run this, and let's see if we're already making good progress. So this should just be an npm run E2E. So it ran the first test. It passed. So that's great. So we can continue going down this path. So we'll kind of jump back. We'll close a couple of these things. This last file over here is my notes. It's the end results of what the porting is going to look like. So in case I get stumped, which this is a pretty easy one, I don't think I will. I have some notes to refer to. Always got to have notes. Okay, so we'll bring this one over next. This is a good starting place for kind of learning how to port stuff over. These are pretty simple tests. I also just did a quick auto format of the code. If you noticed some of the indentation just shifted, that was because I auto formatted. So expect heading is a utility function that's in here, so I'll bring that over as well. I believe, and I do control or a command click to jump to the code where it's implemented, and I'll copy that over. And I'll just drop that underneath the describe block. Again, I'll auto format. And I need to change a few things in here. So There isn't really an element object or function. That's a protractor construct, so we'll remove that. And really this just needs to be converted over to WebDriver.io using their $sign. So $sign function allows you to do a lot of different types of selectors, but by default it'll use a CSS selector, which is exactly what we want. So we'll do a $sign and make sure we've got proper parentheses, and that should work. That should get us our H tag that's passed in and get the text for it. And also it's prior it was using some expect calls from Protractor that aren't completely equivalent to WebDriver.io. In fact, it just doesn't have a second argument. Second argument in Protractor was if you wanted like a custom message. So we'll just remove that. All we really care about is did the text that we got from the element match our expected text. So that's good enough. So if we jump back to this code, this is all about retrieving the H1 block and making sure that it matches our expected string, which is Tour of Heroes. So let's go ahead and run that, see how that looks. Again, I'm just gonna run each piece that we poured over incrementally. Try to eliminate as many variables as possible. Keep that baseline green. Cool, so we've got 2 passing tests. So let's jump back. Get back into our code. Apologize for all the scrolling. Initial page tests, that's what we're looking at. So we'll bring this one over next. I think this one's gonna make use, yep, get page elements, gonna make use of that helper function. So we'll bring that over, or we'll bring over a piece of it. I don't wanna bring over all the code at once. I like to do things in small increments. So take a look at this, and we'll bring over a few elements. And let's see, how did they do this? This was actually inside of their describe block. Oh, so they have a describe block for the whole thing. And that's okay. We don't necessarily need to do that right now. Let's see if we can drop it up top. Okay, and then we need to, again, convert some of these elements over. So we've got another CSS. It looks like element.all, they're going to try to retrieve multiple elements. So that's why it's plural. And we'll use a double $sign to do that. That's WebDriver's equivalent. So $2 that'll give us multiple elements. So it's going to be each of those nav anchors. So that looks good. It's just returning that one thing. Let's make sure we've got all that mapped out correctly here. So you're making this function call, getting the nav elements property, and mapping those elements, getting the actual text for them. And then we're going to compare. We're going to see, hey, did the actual views, do they match our expected views? So that's what's going on here. So that looks good. So let's run that code. We should have 3 tests that hopefully all pass. Perfect. You can see that third one was added, so that looks good. I think there's one more test in here. Yep, this one right here. So this is to make sure that the dashboard is the active view, since there's 2 views to choose from. Paste that in, auto format. And we've got to bring over a couple of things here. So we've got an app dashboard property of this get page elements. What that thing returns is a bunch of different properties of an object. So let's bring that code over. And it's really just this piece. Again, I'm not going to bring all the other items over. And we need to convert this. So it's a single element, so just a single $sign. And there's a little bit of adjustments we need to make here. So is present is not a valid method off of app dashboard, off of an element. That's a protractor thing. So we'll remove that. And what we're really looking for here is WebDriver.io provides a bunch of custom matchers for the expect function, so we're going to use one of those. So there is a to be present method that we can use, a matcher. So we'll use that. And there's one other little thing that might catch you up. We actually need to await on this whole block. Even though our IDE is going to tell us it's unnecessary, that's not correct. We want to make sure our tests are not fragile, so we want to make sure that WebDriver.io is actually polling and looking for the app dashboard in case maybe it takes a little bit to load. So it needs to actually wait on that. But let's go ahead and run this code. There we are. We have 4 passing tests. And let me just show you what I'm talking about with this. So if we go in here and let's bring over the app heroes. This is a different view that is not active by default. So we'll drop another one of these in here. And same sort of thing, just need to convert this to a $sign. Make sure you've got proper parentheses. And if I change this to app heroes, which is not the active one, this is going to fail, and we expect it to fail. And so I'll run this again. And you'll see that it kind of sits here for a few seconds while WebDriver.io tries to find that non-active view. And exactly as we expect, it's not present, which is great. So it's failing, again, because the heroes view is not the default view. And if we switch this back to dashboard, which is the default, you're going to see, again, it passes really quickly. Perfect. And then watch what happens. So I'll go back to app hero, which we know fails, and I remove the await. Something unexpected is going to happen. It's actually going to pass. And it's going to pass because this thing's returning a promise, and it's equating to true because it's returning something. So there you go. Which this is a false positive. This is not correct. Well, the wording here is correct, and that comes from the it block. But the actual expectation should be failing. The app heroes is not your active view. So just be careful, be aware of this. You do need to have an await in here. Why you don't need an await for some of these other ones, this is more static. So we're awaiting for the element and we're getting its text. And so then we're doing a comparison of 2 static things, the actual view names and the expected view names. And those things are both static. There's nothing dynamic, nothing to wait on. So you don't need an await. Same sort of thing here. We're getting a static, the H1 text is static, and we've got the expectation being static as well. So it's just comparing 2 strings. Same thing with the title. The title is static. So those things don't need awaits, but this particular one does. So just be aware of that. And yeah, that should do it for that test. I'll create some other videos that describe how to port over some of the other tests. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them for me, and I'll be sure to reply and help you folks out. Till next time, peace.